Naked in the moonlight, she dropped her blanket, he murmured. Sweet mercy, you'll ruin me. That night began like any other quiet summer evening in the small countryside town, but for her, it felt heavier than usual. The air was warm, yet her heart felt tight. Inside her house, voices had risen again. Her parents were not cruel people, but they were firm. They believed they knew what was best for her. They had plans for her future, and those plans did not match the dreams growing inside her chest. She had tried to explain herself calmly. She had said she wanted time. She had said she wanted to decide her own path. But the more she spoke, the more misunderstood she felt. Her father talked about security. Her mother talked about reputation. Relatives had already started discussing possible matches and opportunities. Every word felt like another brick placed on her shoulders. When the argument ended, the house fell silent. That silence was even worse than the shouting. It felt heavy, like the walls were closing in around her. She went to her room, closed the door softly, and sat on her bed. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She did not want to cry anymore. She was tired of feeling small. Without thinking too much, she stood up and grabbed the first thing she could find, a light blanket resting on the chair near her bed. She did not even put on proper shoes. She just needed air. She needed space. She slipped quietly out of the house, careful not to let the old wooden door make noise. Outside, the night greeted her gently. The sky was clear and the moon was bright and full. It lit up the fields behind her home with a soft silver glow. The countryside was peaceful at night. Crickets sang in the grass. A soft breeze moved through the tall wheat, making it sway like waves in a silent ocean. She walked toward the open fields, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The fabric was thin, but it felt comforting. Each step away from the house felt like she was leaving behind the pressure, even if only for a few minutes. She had loved these fields since she was a child. When she was younger, she would run here with bare feet, chasing butterflies and laughing without fear. Back then the world felt open and endless. Now it felt narrow and planned out by others. As she reached the clearing in the middle of the field, she stopped. The moonlight touched everything softly, the grass, the trees, even her face. For the first time that day, she took a deep breath. The air smelled fresh, carrying hints of soil and summer flowers. She closed her eyes and let the breeze brush against her skin. In that moment, she was not someone's daughter, not someone's future wife, not someone's responsibility. She was just herself, a young woman standing under the wide sky, trying to understand her own heart. The blanket felt heavy suddenly, not physically heavy but symbolic. It felt like all the expectations she had been carrying. Without fully thinking about it, she loosened her grip on it. The cool night air touched her arms and shoulders. It made her shiver slightly, but it also made her feel alive. She let the blanket slide down from her shoulders and fall softly into the grass at her feet. It was not done for attention. No one was supposed to be there. It was a private act, a silent statement to herself. She wanted to feel real. She wanted to feel unhidden, even if only by the moon. Standing there, she felt exposed, not just in body but in emotion. All her fears were close to the surface. What if she disappointed her family? What if she made the wrong choice? What if she stayed silent and lost herself completely? At the same time, on the other side of the field, he was walking slowly along the narrow dirt path. He had returned to town only 3 days earlier. The town looked the same as it had years ago, but he felt different inside. He had once left with big dreams. He had promised himself he would build a strong career in the city. He imagined success, independence, and pride. For a while things had gone well, but slowly challenges came. The job became unstable, confidence faded, plans fell apart. Eventually he had no choice but to return home. Coming back felt like defeat. Every familiar face reminded him of the expectations he once carried. He avoided old friends. He kept conversations short. During the day, he stayed indoors. Only at night did he allow himself to walk outside when fewer people would see him. That night his thoughts were restless. He needed to clear his mind. The fields had always helped him think clearly. As he walked, he looked up at the moon. It felt calm, steady, unchanged. Unlike him, he replayed his failures again and again. Maybe he had not worked hard enough. Maybe he was not as talented as he believed. Maybe he had aimed too high. Each thought pressed down on him. He did not expect to see anyone in the clearing. When he noticed a figure standing under the moonlight, he stopped instantly. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it. The scene looked almost unreal, like something from a dream. She stood there quietly, illuminated by silver light. There was nothing improper in the way she stood. There was no performance, no awareness of being watched. She looked peaceful but fragile at the same time. His heart pounded. He knew he should turn away immediately. This was not his moment. This was hers. But something about the scene held him in place, not desire, but emotion. She looked free in a way he had not felt in years. The moonlight outlined her figure softly, but what struck him most was her expression. Even from a distance, he could sense that she was carrying something heavy inside her. She looked strong and vulnerable at the same time. He shifted his weight slightly, and his foot pressed against a dry branch. It snapped with a sharp sound that broke the silence. She turned quickly, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw him standing at the edge of the clearing. For a second, neither of them spoke. The night seemed to hold its breath. He immediately looked down, not wanting to disrespect her privacy. His voice came out lower than he expected, almost a whisper carried by the breeze. "Sweet mercy," he murmured under his breath, almost to himself. "You'll ruin me." He did not mean it in a careless way. He meant that the sight of someone so fearless in their honesty could break down all the walls he had built around himself. In that single moment, he felt something shift inside him. She quickly bent down and picked up the blanket, wrapping it around herself again. Her cheeks flushed, partly from embarrassment, partly from surprise. Her heart raced. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. "I could ask you the same," he replied gently, still keeping his eyes lowered. There was no anger in his tone, no mockery. Just honesty. The wind moved between them, carrying tension and curiosity at the same time. The field that had felt so empty a few minutes ago now felt charged with something unspoken. She studied him carefully. She recognized him after a moment. He had grown older, more serious. There were lines of tiredness around his eyes that had not been there before. "You came back," she said quietly. He nodded. "I did." That was all. Two simple words, but they carried years of stories. The moonlight continued to shine above them, silent and steady. Neither of them knew it yet, but this unexpected meeting would become the turning point in both their lives. The night that began with frustration and loneliness had shifted into something else entirely, something uncertain, fragile, and full of possibility. And under that wide silver sky, two people who felt lost in different ways stood face to face for the first time, unaware that this quiet moment would echo in their hearts for years to come. For a few long seconds after she wrapped the blanket around herself, neither of them moved. The night air felt cooler now, as if it had noticed the tension between them. The crickets continued their soft song, but everything else seemed still. Even the wind slowed down, brushing past them gently, as though it did not want to interrupt. She held the blanket tightly around her shoulders. Her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She had come to the field to be alone, to escape every pair of judging eyes. And yet here he was, standing just a few steps away, having seen her at her most unguarded moment. He kept his gaze lowered for several seconds out of respect. He did not want to embarrass her further. He knew how easily a moment like this could be misunderstood. When he finally looked up, his expression was not playful or bold. It was serious, almost shaken. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude." His voice carried honesty, not excuses. That made it harder for her to stay angry. You should have made a sound, she replied, though her tone was softer now. I did, he answered, glancing at the broken branch near his foot. Just not on purpose. For a brief moment, an almost smile flickered across her face before disappearing again. The tension loosened slightly. He stepped back a little, giving her space. I can leave, he offered. You were here first. She hesitated. A part of her wanted to tell him to go. That would be the safest choice. It would erase the awkwardness. But another part of her felt something different. It had been weeks since anyone had looked at her without judgment. Weeks since anyone had spoken gently instead of telling her what to do. It's fine, she said finally. The field doesn't belong to me. He nodded, unsure what to say next. Silence returned, but it felt different now. Not sharp, not uncomfortable, just uncertain. He cleared his throat slightly. You looked like you needed air. She let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Is it that obvious? He shook his head. Only to someone who came here for the same reason. That caught her attention. She studied him more carefully now. The boy she remembered from years ago had always seemed confident, almost too sure of himself. The man standing in front of her now looked thoughtful, quieter. There was tiredness in his eyes, but also depth. You don't seem like the type who runs from arguments, she said. He gave a faint smile. I don't run. I just think better when I'm outside. The moonlight made everything softer, even their expressions. She found herself sitting down on the grass again, pulling the blanket closer around her. After a short pause, he lowered himself to sit several feet away, careful to keep distance between them. For a while they simply looked at the horizon. The field stretched endlessly, glowing silver. The town lights flickered faintly in the distance. I didn't mean what I said to sound strange, he spoke after a moment. She turned slightly toward him. What part? He hesitated, then repeated quietly, Sweet mercy, you'll ruin me. The words hung in the air again, but this time they felt less shocking. She raised an eyebrow. That's not something people usually say by accident. He let out a slow breath. It wasn't about what you think. It wasn't about appearance, it was about the moment. He searched for simple words. You looked free, completely free, and I realized I haven't felt that way in a long time. She blinked, surprised. She had expected embarrassment or teasing. Instead, she heard sincerity. You think standing in a field makes someone free? She asked gently. No, he replied, but standing without fear does. That sentence stayed between them. She looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of the blanket between her fingers. I wasn't fearless, she admitted. I was frustrated. With your family, she looked up quickly. How do you know? He shrugged slightly. Small towns don't hide much, and you left your house like someone escaping something. She almost laughed at that. Was it that dramatic? A little, he said, smiling faintly. The smile felt rare on his face, like something he had not practiced in a while. She grew quiet again, then spoke more honestly than she expected. They've planned everything, every year of my life, every decision. I feel like I'm living someone else's story. He listened carefully, not interrupting. They talk about security, about what people will say, about stability, she continued. But no one asks what I want. And what do you want? He asked. The question was simple, but it felt heavy. She opened her mouth to answer, then paused. She realized she had not spoken her true desires out loud in a long time. I want time, she said finally. Time to figure out who I am, time to choose something for myself. He nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. Time is expensive, he said quietly, especially here. She studied him again. You sound like someone who lost some. He looked at the ground, running his hand through the grass. I left town thinking I would come back successful. I had plans, big ones, but plans don't always work the way you expect. Her expression softened. So you came back? Yes, that must have been hard. He gave a short, honest laugh. Harder than leaving. For the first time, she saw the weight he was carrying. The town saw only a man who had returned. They did not see the dreams that had shifted, the confidence that had cracked. I thought I would feel relief coming home, he continued. Instead, I felt smaller. The honesty in his voice surprised even him. She shifted slightly closer, though still wrapped tightly in her blanket. "You don't look small." He looked at her, confused. "You look tired," she corrected gently, "but not small." The breeze moved through the wheat again, creating a soft, whispering sound around them. The night no longer felt awkward. It felt shared. "You weren't supposed to see me like that," she said after a while. "I know. I wasn't trying to prove anything." "I know," he repeated. She looked up at the moon. "I just wanted to feel unhidden, even for a minute." "That's what I meant," he replied quietly. "That kind of honesty is rare. It shakes people." She glanced at him. "Shakes them." "Yes, makes them question their own walls." A thoughtful silence followed. Neither of them noticed how much time had passed. The earlier embarrassment had turned into something steadier, understanding. "You can tell people you saw me acting dramatic," she said lightly. "I won't." "Why?" "Because it wasn't dramatic," he answered. "It was real." Her heart skipped slightly at that word, real. No one had described her feelings that way before. She pulled the blanket closer again, not from shame now, but from comfort. The field felt different than it had an hour ago. It no longer felt like a place to escape alone. It felt like a space where honesty could exist without punishment. "I should go soon," she said quietly. "Before they notice I'm gone." He nodded. "I should too." But neither of them stood up immediately. The moon continued shining above, steady and bright, as if marking this moment quietly in memory. "Will you come back here?" he asked after a pause. She considered the question carefully. "Maybe." He gave a small nod. "I walk here most nights." "That sounds lonely." "It was," he admitted. She stood slowly, brushing grass from the blanket. He stood as well, keeping a respectful distance. For a second they faced each other again, closer than before. The earlier shock was gone. In its place was something softer, curiosity, perhaps even hope. "Good night," she said gently. "Good night," he replied. She turned and began walking back toward the town lights. He watched her go, not staring, just thoughtful. As she walked, she realized something had shifted inside her. The argument at home still existed. The expectations had not disappeared, but she no longer felt entirely alone in carrying them. Behind her, he remained in the clearing for a few more minutes. He looked at the place where she had first stood in the moonlight. The image stayed in his mind, not because of how she looked, but because of how free she seemed in that brief second. He understood now why the words had slipped out of his mouth. It was not temptation that had shaken him. It was courage. And as he finally turned to walk home, he knew that this unexpected meeting was not just a random moment under the moon. It was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet, but both of them felt. The next evening, the sky looked almost the same as the night before, wide, clear, and painted with soft silver light. But inside both of them, something had changed. They had returned home after their unexpected meeting with restless thoughts. Neither had planned to see the other again so soon, yet both found themselves thinking about the field. She tried to act normal during the day. At breakfast, her mother spoke about visiting relatives. Her father discussed plans in his usual firm tone. She nodded where needed, answered politely, and kept her emotions steady. But her mind drifted back to the clearing in the field. She remembered the way he had looked down respectfully. She remembered how he had said her honesty shook him. No one had ever described her that way before. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel completely unheard. That small shift gave her quiet strength. Meanwhile, he spent the day helping his father fix a broken fence near their house. The physical work kept his hands busy, but his thoughts wandered. He replayed the moment when she had stood under the moonlight. Not the image itself, but the feeling of it, the stillness, the courage, the vulnerability. He had not expected to feel moved by something so simple. He told himself it had only been a conversation, nothing more. But he knew that was not entirely true. Something about her honesty had reached a place inside him that had been closed for months. That evening, as the sun began to set, She stood near her bedroom window. The sky slowly turned from orange to purple. She told herself she would not go back to the field. It would seem foolish, too intentional. But as darkness settled, she felt the same tightness in her chest she had felt the night before. She picked up the same light blanket. This time, she wore sandals. This time, she moved more quietly, not from panic but from caution. When she stepped outside, the air felt cooler than the previous night. The moon was not as full, but it still offered enough light to guide her path. With each step toward the clearing, her heart beat a little faster. She told herself she was only going for air again. Nothing more. He had arrived earlier that night. He did not know if she would come. Part of him hoped she would. Another part worried that she would avoid the place entirely after the embarrassment of being seen. He stood near the edge of the clearing, hands in his pockets, staring at the horizon. When he heard soft footsteps behind him, he turned slowly. She was there. For a second, they simply looked at each other. There was no shock this time, no sudden surprise, just awareness. "You came back," he said gently. "So did you," she replied. A small smile appeared on both their faces. The tension from the night before had faded, replaced by something easier. She walked toward the center of the clearing and sat down again. He followed, leaving a respectful distance between them just as before. The space between them did not feel cold. It felt careful. "I wasn't sure you would return," he admitted. "I wasn't sure either," she said honestly. They both laughed softly at that. For a while they spoke about simple things, the weather, the town, how quiet the nights felt compared to the noise of the city. It was easier to begin with safe topics, but silence eventually returned, and this time it invited something deeper. "My parents met with a family today," she said suddenly. He turned toward her. "About your future," she nodded, "and they are serious." He waited, sensing there was more. "I feel like I'm watching my own life from the outside," she continued. "Everyone speaks as if the decision is already made." "Have you told them clearly how you feel?" he asked. "I tried," she replied, "but they think I'm confused or ungrateful." He picked a small piece of grass and rolled it between his fingers. "It's hard for people to understand a choice they've never considered themselves." She looked at him thoughtfully. "And what about you? Did your family understand when you left?" He shook his head slightly. "Not fully. They supported me, but they were afraid. This town feels safe to them, predictable. And the city was. It was exciting at first," he said. "Everything felt possible, but possibility can turn into pressure quickly." She listened carefully. "I wanted to prove myself," he continued. "I worked long hours. I ignored signs that things weren't stable. When the company started cutting positions, I convinced myself I would be fine." "And you weren't," she said softly. "No." He looked up at the moon. "Coming back felt like failure. I avoided people because I didn't want to answer questions." She noticed the tightness in his jaw when he said that. "You're not a failure," she said quietly. He gave her a small, doubtful smile. "That's easy to say." "I mean it," she insisted. "You tried something bigger. That takes courage." He studied her face, searching for pity but found none, only sincerity. "Do you regret leaving?" she asked. He thought carefully before answering. "No, I regret not preparing myself for the possibility of falling." She considered that. They both fell silent again, but this silence was different from the previous night. It felt comfortable, as if they were not rushing to fill it. After a few minutes, she spoke again, her voice softer than before. "When you said I would ruin you," she began carefully, "what did you really mean?" He did not answer immediately. He wanted to choose his words carefully. "I meant that seeing someone be honest without hiding made me realize how much I've been hiding," he said. "If I allowed myself to feel that kind of openness, it would change me." "Change you how?" "I might stop pretending I'm okay with everything," he replied. "I might admit I'm scared." She looked at him, surprised by the directness. "It's strange," she said slowly. "I thought standing there made me look weak." "It didn't," he said firmly. "It looked strong. The breeze picked up slightly, moving her hair across her face. She brushed it aside and looked down at the grass. "I'm not strong all the time," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'll just agree to everything to keep peace." "And would that make you happy?" he asked. She did not answer right away. "No," she said finally. "Then maybe strength isn't about never feeling tired," he said. "Maybe it's about choosing yourself even when you are." She let those words settle. The field seemed to listen with them. The moonlight softened their outlines, turning the clearing into a quiet world separate from the town. "I've never talked like this with anyone here," she confessed. "Neither have I," he admitted. "Why is that?" "Because here everyone already thinks they know your story," he said. "They don't ask new questions." She smiled faintly. "And you do." "I'm trying." She looked at him more openly now. The distance between them felt smaller, even though they had not moved physically closer. "Do you think it's selfish to choose your own path?" she asked. "I think it's dangerous," he replied. "Dangerous?" "Yes. Because it disappoints people who expect something else," she sighed. "I don't want to hurt them." "You might not have to," he said. "Sometimes disappointment fades when people see you stand firm." She watched him carefully. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." He hesitated. "When I first left town, my father didn't speak to me for days. He thought I was chasing a dream that would break me." "And was he right?" "In some ways," he admitted. "But it also taught me things I wouldn't have learned here." She nodded slowly. The night grew deeper around them. The stars seemed brighter now. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a moment. She nodded. "If there were no expectations, no pressure, what would you choose?" She closed her eyes briefly, imagining that world. "I would study," she said. "Travel if I could, learn something meaningful. I don't want to rush into a life I don't understand yet." He smiled gently. "That doesn't sound unreasonable." "It sounds impossible here," she replied. "Not impossible," he said, "just difficult." She looked at him again, noticing how different he seemed compared to the stories she had heard about his return. "You don't seem defeated," she said. "I'm still figuring things out," he admitted. "But talking like this, it reminds me that I'm not the only one struggling." She felt the same. The blanket around her shoulders no longer felt like protection. It felt like comfort. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "last night I felt embarrassed that you saw me like that." "And tonight?" he asked. "Tonight I'm glad you did." He blinked, surprised. "Because if you hadn't," she continued, "we wouldn't be talking now." He felt something warm settle in his chest. The moon moved slightly higher in the sky, marking the passage of time. "I don't know what will happen," she said quietly, "with my family, with your plans." "Neither do I," he replied. "But this," she gestured gently around them, "feels honest." "It does," he agreed. They did not need to say more. That night they stayed in the clearing longer than before, sharing stories from childhood, small memories, quiet fears. There was no rush, no dramatic promises, just two people allowing themselves to be seen without judgment. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter than when she had arrived. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked carefully. She considered for only a second. "Yes," she said. As she walked back toward the town, she realized something important. The moonlight had not only revealed her vulnerability that first night, it had opened a door to something deeper, understanding. And in that quiet field, under a sky that seemed endless, two lives that once felt stuck had begun to move again, slowly and honestly, toward something neither of them could fully name yet. But both were beginning to trust. The nights in the field slowly became a quiet routine. Not every evening, but often enough that both of them began to expect it. They never made dramatic plans. They never promised to meet at a certain hour. Yet somehow, when the sky turned dark and the moon rose high, their steps carried them to the same clearing. At first, they talked mostly about fears and past mistakes, but as the days passed, their conversations began to change. They started speaking about possibilities instead of just problems. The field no longer felt like a place to escape. It felt like a place to grow. She began to notice changes in herself during the day. When her parents brought up her future again, she did not immediately lower her eyes. She listened calmly and spoke more clearly. She did not argue loudly. She simply stated what she wanted with steady words. Her mother noticed first. "You seem different," her mother said one afternoon while folding clothes. "Different how?" she asked carefully. "Stronger," her mother replied, studying her face. She did not answer, but inside she knew the reason. Having someone listen without judgment had given her courage. In the field she could speak freely. That freedom slowly followed her back home. He also began to change. For weeks after returning to town, he had avoided conversations about work. If someone asked about his plans, he would shrug and change the topic. But now, after many late-night talks in the clearing, something inside him felt steadier. One morning, he sat at the kitchen table with his father. "I've been thinking," he began. His father looked up from his tea, surprised by the serious tone. "I want to try again," he continued. "Maybe not in the same way as before, but I don't want to stay stuck." His father did not respond immediately. The silence felt long, but this silence was not heavy. It was thoughtful. "Trying again is not shameful," his father finally said. "Only giving up without learning is." Those words stayed with him the entire day. That evening when he went to the field, he told her about the conversation. "He didn't laugh?" she asked. "No," he said with a small smile. "He looked proud. I didn't expect that." She felt happy for him in a way that surprised her. His small victory felt important to her too. In return, she told him about speaking calmly to her mother. "What did she say?" he asked. "She didn't agree," she admitted, "but she listened longer than usual." "That's progress," he said. They both understood that change in a small town did not happen quickly. It moved slowly, like the wind through the wheat, steady but patient. However, not everything remained peaceful. One afternoon, her father called her into the sitting room. Two relatives were there. The atmosphere felt serious. "We have good news," her father said firmly. "The other family is ready to move forward." Her stomach tightened. She had expected this moment. She had prepared words in her mind many times, but standing there in front of everyone, it felt harder than she imagined. "I need more time," she said clearly. The room fell silent. "Time for what?" one relative asked. "To decide my own path," she replied. Her father's expression hardened slightly. "This is a good opportunity. We have thought carefully." "I know," she said respectfully, "but I need to think carefully too." Her voice did not shake. That surprised even her. The discussion did not end happily. There were raised voices. There were disappointed looks, but she did not step back from her words. That night when she reached the field, her eyes were bright, not from tears but from intensity. "They weren't happy," she told him. "I didn't expect they would be," he said gently. "I felt scared," she admitted, "but I said it anyway." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "That takes courage." She sat down in the grass, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "What if they never forgive me?" she asked. "Forgiveness often comes after understanding," he said. "And understanding takes time." She looked at him carefully. "And what about you? Are you staying here?" He hesitated. Earlier that week, he had received an email. A company in another city had responded to his application. It was not as big as his previous job, but it was an opportunity. "I might have to leave," he said honestly. Her heart dropped slightly, though she tried not to show it. "When?" she asked. "If I accept in a few weeks." Silence settled between them. The night felt heavier than usual. "This town feels different now," he continued. "Not because it changed, but because I changed." She understood that feeling deeply. "Would you come back again?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "It depends on what I build." The uncertainty between them felt real. There were no promises, no dramatic declarations, just two people standing at crossroads. The next few days were filled with quiet tension. At home, her parents became colder. They did not shout, but their disappointment was clear. Relatives stopped visiting as often. Whispers began to travel through the town. She heard them at the market one afternoon. "She thinks she knows better." Young people forget tradition. The words hurt, but she did not turn back. He also faced quiet judgment. Some neighbors said he had failed in the city and was now chasing another uncertain path. Others advised him to settle down and stop dreaming. For a moment, he felt the old doubt return. One evening, he did not go to the field. He stayed home, staring at the email on his phone. Accepting the offer meant risk. Staying meant safety but regret. She waited in the clearing that night longer than usual. When he did not appear, she felt a familiar loneliness creep back in. But instead of feeling abandoned, she felt concerned. The next evening he came. "I almost didn't," he admitted as soon as he saw her. "Why?" she asked. "Because I was afraid of leaving again, afraid of failing again." She looked at him steadily. "And what did you decide?" He took a slow breath. "That fear shouldn't decide for me." Her eyes softened. "So you're going?" "Yes." The word felt heavy but also strong. She nodded slowly. "Then go." He blinked, surprised by her calmness. "You don't sound upset," he said. "I am," she admitted. "But I don't want you to shrink your life because of fear." The wind moved through the field, carrying her words with it. "You once said seeing me free shook you," she continued. "Now I'm saying the same to you. Don't hide." He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time again. "You're braver than you think," he said. "And you're stronger than you believe," she replied. They both smiled faintly. The days passed quickly after that. She continued standing firm at home. Her parents remained distant, but they stopped pushing as aggressively. It was as if they were waiting to see if her determination would fade. It did not. He accepted the job offer. On his last night before leaving, they met again in the clearing. The moon was thinner now, almost shy behind light clouds. "I'm not sure what happens next," he said quietly. "Neither am I," she replied. "But I'm glad that night happened," he added. She smiled softly. "So am I." They did not speak about love. They did not make promises about forever. What they shared was deeper than quick words. It was respect. It was courage passed from one heart to another. "Whatever you build," she said, "build it honestly." "I will," he answered. "And you?" he asked. "I will choose my path," she said. They stood facing each other, the field silent around them. The night felt like a turning page. They both understood something important. Choosing each other was not about staying in the same place. It was about becoming stronger individually. As he walked away from the field for the last time before his departure, he felt different from the man who had returned defeated weeks earlier. And as she walked back toward her home, she no longer felt like a girl trapped in someone else's plans. The risk of choosing courage had changed them both. The future remained uncertain. But for the first time, uncertainty did not feel like fear. The morning he left town, the sky was pale and quiet. There were no dramatic goodbyes in the field that day, no long speeches. They had already said what mattered on his last night there. Still, when she woke up, she felt a strange emptiness, as if something steady in her world had shifted. From her bedroom window, she could see the road that led out of town. She did not know the exact time he would leave, and she did not try to find out. Part of her believed that if she stood there waiting, it would make everything harder. Instead, she wrapped her blanket around her shoulders, not because she needed it, but because it reminded her of the night that had started everything. She stood in her room quietly and whispered, "Be brave." It was not clear whether she was speaking to him or to herself. He left town with a single suitcase and a heart that felt lighter than it had months earlier. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. As the bus moved down the road, he looked out the window at the fields one last time. The clearing was not visible from the road, but he knew exactly where it was. He did not think about the moment he first saw her under the moonlight. Instead, he thought about the conversations that followed, the honesty, the way she had told him not to shrink his life. For the first time since his earlier failure, he did not feel like he was escaping. He felt like he was choosing. Back in town, life did not suddenly become easy for her. Her parents remained quiet around her. There were no more formal meetings with other families, but there was a heavy silence at dinner. It would have been easier to apologize and agree to everything. It would have brought back comfort and approval. But each time doubt appeared, she remembered the field. She remembered standing there, feeling exposed yet alive. She remembered speaking clearly about what she wanted. That memory became her anchor. A week after he left, she gathered her courage and spoke again to her parents. "I want to apply for further studies," she said calmly. Her father looked surprised. "Away from town?" "Yes," she replied, her mother's eyes filled with concern. "That is not simple." "I know," she said gently, "but I am not asking to run away. I am asking to grow." The conversation lasted hours. There were questions about safety, about money, about reputation. She answered each one patiently. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse them of controlling her. She spoke about her dreams in simple, steady words. Her father did not agree immediately. But something had changed in the way he looked at her. He no longer saw a confused child. He saw determination. Days turned into weeks. In the city, he faced new challenges. The job was demanding. The office was smaller than his previous one, but the work required focus and discipline. At first, he felt the old fear creeping back in. What if he failed again? What if this chance slipped away? One evening, after a long day, he walked alone through a park near his apartment. The city lights were bright, but they did not compare to the soft glow of the moon in the countryside. He looked up at the sky and thought about the field. He realized something important. The strength he felt now did not come from success. It came from accepting vulnerability, from admitting fear and moving forward anyway. He began working with a clearer mind. He asked questions instead of pretending to know everything. He stayed late when needed, but he also rested when he felt overwhelmed. Slowly his confidence returned, not the loud, proud confidence of his youth, but a steady, quiet one. Back in town, she received a letter. Her application had been accepted. When she opened the envelope, her hands trembled. She read the words twice to make sure she understood correctly. She had been offered a place in a program in a nearby city. She walked into the living room holding the letter. "They accepted me," she said softly. Her mother covered her mouth in surprise. Her father took the letter and read it carefully. The room was silent. Finally, her father looked up. "If you go," he said slowly, "you must go seriously, no half decisions." "I won't treat it lightly," she promised. He nodded once. It was not full excitement, but it was permission. That night she went to the field alone. The moon was thin, almost hidden, but the clearing still felt familiar. She stood in the same place where she had once let the blanket fall. This time she kept it around her shoulders, not from fear but from comfort. "I did it," she whispered to the night. The wind moved gently through the grass as if answering her. She wished he could see this moment. She wished she could tell him in person. But she understood that life was moving forward for both of them. Weeks later, she left town too. The day she departed felt different from his. Her parents stood at the doorway. Her mother hugged her tightly. Her father placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Remember who you are," he said. "I will," she replied. As the bus carried her away, she looked out at the fields. For a brief second, she imagined she could see two figures sitting in the clearing, talking under the moon. In the city, their lives grew busy. They did not speak every day. Sometimes weeks passed between messages, but when they did talk, the conversations felt real. They shared small victories and quiet fears. There were no dramatic promises about the future. There was simply support. Months turned into a year. He earned recognition at work for a project he completed with care and patience. She excelled in her studies, surprising even herself with how capable she felt. One evening, during a short visit home for a holiday, she walked back to the field. She did not tell anyone. She simply followed the path her feet remembered. The clearing looked smaller than before, or perhaps she had grown. She stood there under the moonlight again, breathing deeply. The air felt the same, cool and honest. Footsteps approached from behind. She turned, her heart racing slightly. It was him. He had also returned to town for a short visit and had come to the same place without knowing if she would be there. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, surprised and smiling. "You still come here," he said. "So do you," she replied. They walked toward the center of the clearing, standing closer now than they had that first night long ago. "You look different," he said. "Stronger?" she asked lightly. "Yes," he smiled. "And happier." "You too," she replied. They sat down in the grass, not needing distance anymore. "Do you ever think about that first night?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I was terrified I had ruined everything by speaking," he said. She laughed softly. "You didn't ruin anything." He looked at her seriously. "You changed me." She felt her heart warm at the honesty. "And you changed me," she replied. They spoke for hours, catching up fully, sharing stories that could not fit into short messages. The field felt like a bridge between who they had been and who they were becoming. At one point, she looked up at the moon and smiled. "You know," she said quietly, "that night wasn't about rebellion." "No," he asked. "It was about reclaiming myself." He nodded slowly. "And when I said you would ruin me, I didn't mean destroy." "I know," she said gently. "I meant you would undo the fear I was hiding behind." She reached for his hand, not dramatically, but naturally. "The moonlight didn't ruin us," she said. "No," he agreed. "It revealed us." They sat there in comfortable silence, no longer uncertain, no longer afraid of choosing their own paths. The future was still unwritten. They did not know where their careers would lead or where life would settle them, but they understood something deeper now. Real courage was not loud. It was quiet decisions made under open skies. And years later, whenever life felt heavy again, they both remembered that clearing. The night she stood vulnerable and unhidden, and the moment he chose to face his fear instead of turning away. That was where everything truly began, not with perfection, not with certainty,